Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus.
Next up, call up, let's go saints. Guided by faith where the universe paints. Celestial saints in a cosmic grace. Ladder wave, find your way to a ladder wave. Find your way to a ladder wave. Find your way to a ladder wave. Time is brave. Next up, call up, ladder wave. Ladder wave, ladder wave.
Okay, there's something about Latterwave. What are angels? LDS memes joined me earlier, and I just got Sean Morris in the house, and we're calling Aiden Leahona Extreme, which is his new nickname. I like it.
All right.
Yeah, bring that down. Bring that, just like that.
Hello, everybody.
What's going on?
What are angels? Tell me about that. We were just talking about this idea of angels. Angels are kind of interesting, right? People like angels.
Yeah. So we were just talking about the nature of angels. So we know that many times in Scripture we have angels. The main idea of what an angel is a messenger of God that brings the word from God to man. But then we were thinking, other than the purpose of an angel, what is the nature of an angel? We know that as men, we and women, we can ascend to godhood through various processes, and that with time, with eternal progression, we're going to be able to learn, and with a resurrected body, we will become gods and create worlds of our own.
This is pretty sweet.
But we were wondering, where do angels tie into that? Because they are beings, they have a soul. Even rocks have souls. We know that matter was before God as well. There were spirits of everything that were untamed, and God came and tamed those that matter. Well, the question is that I was asking Xerxes here was, so what are they? Are they like animals? Because we know that animals cannot become gods. What would you think about that, Andreas?
First off, yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
angels freak me out because they're like, at least in my opinion, like unthinking, unfeeling messengers of God a lot of the time. But as you said, they do have some agency of their own. But being eternal beings, they don't change, so they don't really get to like taste food or experience other things that we get to as being temporary flesh beings rather than being beings of light. So there is an element of jealousy towards humanity there in angels, I feel. So when they show up and they're just looking at each other like God says it's supposed to rain today, you know, they don't really feel any giddiness when they're pouring out the chalice of water all over us and everybody's dying in a flood. But, you know, they're not really feeling bad for us either. And, you know, a fallen angel just seems to be one that goes against God. But to say that he created those by accident is to not believe fully in God, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith believed when his horse died that he expected to have it in eternity. And so there's been a lot of talk about animals having spirits. I know that seems kind of like a funny way to like start that, but seriously, the idea that animals don't have spirits but rocks do, or obviously animals do have spirits, but whether or not they can become gods, I think is more of a question of, is spirit on a road to ascension generally? And probably, I think in general, the idea that everything is part of God, whatever we're calling that, and everything ends up back being part of God, whether or not it has agency that is learned here might be the big deal. And so angels, this idea of Adonai Elohim, where they start out as the sons of God or like the created mass or matter of the eternal source existence, then goes through this process. And that process has dynamic range between right and wrong, whatever that means, but it seems like chaos and order. And the more symmetry that's observed and achieved and obliged to, the closer you come to having more agency. And agency seems like something that is awarded generally in nature. So the more responsibilities you take, the more agency you have.
Yeah. Now, my thought on that was an angel, of course, maybe this is what your theory was basically, that possibly there's no space for progression and that they're eternal and that they're always the same and that they don't change.
They're defined, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we know that there are worlds without end. This is not the only world. There are many other worlds that have been created. In the time, I was thinking maybe another theory could be that maybe angels are spirits who have not yet started their process to become gods, because we know that before we came on this earth, we had a knowledge of things, but we were not, we didn't know really right from wrong we didn't have a testimony, basically. And so I'm thinking either angels are spirits before they are sent to Earth or to a Earth or world in order to experience things and progress, or maybe being an angel could be a part of the process of becoming a god. Perhaps
there are
after
plenty of
death,
different sorts of spirits that are running around the omniverse, if you want to call it that.
I guess so, but the thing is, maybe part of the process of becoming a god is being able to experience everything. What made Jesus a god is that he was the Messiah. He took on all the sins of humanity, and he experienced all things, and he had a perfect knowledge of all things, and he had a resurrected body.
What does it mean, God becoming? Like, that's a verb and a noun next to each other. So, like,
Becoming a god.
Like, becoming God doesn't mean to assume a title. It's literally the act of creating each moment based on the last. That's why like a recreational activity is usually a rhythmic one, because just actually the act of continuing to create reality from one moment to the next is a rhythmic, musical, or game-like activity.
Well,
Which is
you could assume that
creation, recreation, or becoming.
Now you could assume that
David Butler jumping in just threw in some interesting stuff. Hey, David,
go ahead.
So Genesis 1:1 was, in the beginning he created gods, the heaven and the earth. So maybe God created the angels on day one.
Wait. First of all, I'm not a Mormon, so just want to put that out there. If everyone else in the room is a Mormon, I feel like maybe we should just clarify our positions on the topic.
I feel like it was pretty clear when you voted. I don't think I've seen too many LDS
fans. Wait. On the first day he created the gods. Okay, could this also be this type of way of, and I'm assuming this is the first, this is the Jewish Old Testament Bible that quotes from?
Yeah, so there's several different versions of it, but yeah,
with the one with the gods in it. But that the idea of our God is the dominant one? You know, ours is the best, that type of thing. Ours created your gods. And it's like kind of giving this describing what Jehovah is as this being the supreme, over-encompassing, created everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the angel Abaddon Apollyon in the Bible seems to map very well onto the Greek god Apollo. Essentially, the pantheons of angels that serve under the Elohim are just. It's how they adopted the pagan stories without fully tossing them out. So they didn't insult people they wanted to convert.
Yeah. I mean,
I think the thing also you have to understand is the Bible's written so many times over in different ways and different ways of looking at it. And so in the original version of the Bible, which you can still see in modern translations. So for instance, you read like the Tower of Babel, come, let us just distract them because soon they'll be with us. Like all of these things that have to do with plurality of God, where God's talking to God's self, the Elohim are talking to each other. Right, and this is in the modern King James version of the Bible. I think it even makes it into the NIV version of the Bible, the plurality of God. But this
you have never been thinking with the voice in your head and referred to you and the voice as we.
We the we. And introducing the legendary and super bass David Butler. Good to have you, man. How's it going?
How's it going, David?
Nice to have you.
How goes it, brother, man?
I don't know if you can.
I don't think like the important thing is to dig into the origin story of each particular angel. I think the underlying archetype of angel is literally just some sort of spiritual tool embodied in a being created by the one most high God that you have in your particular pantheon. And then like the angel is the permanent thing that does the task that it's created to do. And then the earthly beings are the temporary ones that run around the wheel of time and get looked at as if we're God's pet hamsters that he cares more about than the very, very elegantly complex servant that he assembled.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that angels might be better than us in some respects at doing what God asks of them. But David, what do you think?
Yeah, they don't rot.
Well, I was just going to explain myself. So, look, what I was talking about is just the absolute bog standard Hebrew Old Testament, Genesis 1:1. But it turns out there's a couple of funny ways to read it that may bear on the question of angels. And I only put one of them in the chat, so I'll tell you both of them. So, first, one is the first word in the Old Testament is bereshit, which is translated conventionally as in the beginning. But what it really means is ba is in or with, resh means principal one, head, and eat means feminine. Okay, so the translation is understood to be in the first feminine one, meaning in the first time, and that's how we get the understanding in the beginning. But at least one of the Targums understood it to mean with the first angel and translated it as Bahukama. So I forget which one of the Targums it is, but it starts with wisdom with wisdom God created the heaven and the earth, because wisdom was the name of the great female angel who was God's peer and helper. This is, by the way, what Proverbs 3:19 is also understood by some to say, that wisdom is a divine being with God who helps create the earth. So
I've heard that in certain interpretations, that any permanent artifact can be considered an angel, like the throne upon which God even sits technically is an angel, and the universe itself could actually be considered an angel. So there's a lot of different ways to dig into this.
It's very disappointing that we have the Hebrew Bible, probably the most studied or overanalyzed book, and because of our overanalyzation of it, we can't actually really even understood it to the extent of how they would interpret it 3,000 years ago.
I don't know. I feel like David kind of just blew my mind a little bit in just that one translation. Because if you know about the Sophia part,
like I don't like I just.
So the idea of the feminine being the wife of God. Sorry.
Yeah. The challenge is that actually a text like, even setting aside grammatical ambiguities, and there's another one in that verse, right? Is that the text, like the Old Testament, has been understood 1,000 ways by 1,000 different people, right? Set aside transmission and translation problems. Just looking at the Hebrew today, you can read that verse different ways. So let me point out the other one. Here's the one I put in the chat. Okay, so the conventional reading says, so Bereshit, in the beginning, bara Elohim, and that's understood to be bara is the verb, created, Elohim is God. Now, it's a little weird that Elohim is a plural and bara is a singular, but we just sort of conventionally go, well, okay, but God is plural because he's great. And so it's the plural of majesty or whatever, okay? But I've been reading the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a classic, very, very old Jewish mystical book. My friend Rob K. urged me to reread it, and I'm doing it. I have not yet begun reciting all of the permutations of the name of God, but maybe one of these days. And apparently an old Jewish reading is very different of the verse. There's an old Jewish mystical reading that reads bara as he created, and Elohim is not the subject, it's the object, in which case the verse says, in the beginning, he created gods, the heavens, and the earth. And in that case, who are the gods that he created, right? And so my point was, this is what I was putting in the chat. Maybe it's the angels. Maybe the angels are created on day one to participate in the work of creation with him, whoever he is.
And then when they become Adonai Elohim, that's when they're born, or something to that effect? Or what's the deal with, like, because Job talks about, and then the angels came down, the sons of God came down. And
right, where were you when the sons of God shouted for joy? It's very interesting. So I know there are other old texts, like the Song of the Three Children, which is an apocryphon about the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's supposed to be the song they're singing in the fire when they're burning but not burning to death. That's an example. That's one of the texts that claims specifically that angels were created on day one, but that's not in all of the creation accounts. So for some reason, in the old Hebrew traditions, some people thought angels were created early, and some thought they were not.
So do you think of them as like machines, or are they kind of like, so what is, because this idea of Jesus being, and that we, just to talk about two types of angels before and after life. What do you think about all
that? Man, that's a really good question.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, look, the word just means messenger, right? I think you said it right off the bat. So I think, man, there's a lot that we don't know. And I think that if God could send a resurrected person to do a job, maybe sometimes that's the right answer. And if God needs to send people who are not yet resurrected, maybe that's the right answer. And if God needs to send something that looks like a sphinx, right? Maybe sometimes that is the thing that does the job. Or maybe to Sean's point, right? So I mean, I've heard this too. I've heard stories that like the throne is understood to the throne of God is full of angels, right? Like it's a
Or even
angel
comprised of them.
receptacle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sean pulled up this thing here. The what's this all about?
Oh, that's just some crazy art that there's some things in there about this kind of stuff, but it's a little esoteric. Bohm is difficult.
He's like a early modern Christian mystic, right?
Yeah, he was also considered a heretic by the church because he was writing some things that they didn't exactly agree with. He essentially saw the beatific vision in a puddle where there was just a bunch of reflections of dark and light patterns where there was is. Essentially, it comes down to the universe is just a pattern of is and isn't, where where if there's something that you can smack your hand against, that's where there is something, and if your fist just waves through it, then there just isn't something there. And all of these different bodies that are constructed by God are looked out upon through the universe is looked upon through all of these different eyes by the same God. Whether or not the body breaks down is pretty much tells you whether or not it's an earthly one. Like an angelic body doesn't break down. Some angels may be simple enough that God doesn't totally forget himself while it looks out through the eye of the angel, like it does with like a human. But there was an angel that God specifically created to tell the angel to disobey him, and that angel lost its mind. And a lot of the pantheons, a lot of the different belief systems, there's at least a footnote about that angel being God's favorite.
Yeah. So boom. So help me understand this. So you said there are things that are created that are tangible and also things that are intangible, and you could tell the difference by whether your hand went through them. I mean, was his experience that like he would regularly walk through immaterial things? That's fascinating.
It's also very Joseph Smith.
Like the universe itself is just a pattern of light and dark, of is and isn't.
Yeah.
Like if there is something there, your hand will hit it. If there isn't something there, then it'll pass right through if it's empty space.
I don't know if you know this.
That's like an example of how you can experience something.
Do you know this from Mormon lore, or are you messing with all of us right now? Because like
this has nothing to do with Mormon lore. Like if you don't have space,
Joseph Smith says you have to try to shake the hands. You have to try to shake the hand of the angel, or else it's not real. It's like literally.
If you didn't have spaces between your fingers, you wouldn't have fingers. Like so, the spaces are just as important as a part of your hand as the fingers.
Right. Yeah, it's electrostatic. But there's also this idea that if it's immaterial, it can be.
It's conceptual. Like if you didn't have space between your fingers, you'd have a fucking flipper.
Pardon his language. Hey, Chad made it. What's up? How's it going? Yeah.
So Joseph Smith,
the man, the myth, and the legend.
Yeah, I'm kind of sick, so a little bit. So I need to get to bed early, so I won't be here long.
I gotta hop off too in a minute, but Andreas was trying to make the point that there's like a Joseph Smith thing here, Sean, which is one of the sort of, so there's like some gnarly stuff that Joseph said and did, right? Like funky, weird stuff. One of the odd things was he talked about if you see a spirit, you should test it by offering to shake its hand, because an honest spirit, a well-intentioned, a good spirit, like an angel, knows its material and is not going to try and deceive you and won't shake your hand. But an evil spirit, even though it knows it's immaterial, will try to deceive you and shake your hand. So there's one of these odd bits of Mormon lore.
I was like,
we're all feeling the same elephant here. That's what we're doing. Yeah, definitely.
Well,
that's interesting. Someone said something, I remember, about how DMT elves, like you'll try to shake their hand if you take DMT and you're tripping on it, and then you won't be able to feel them.
A bunch of people. So I heard, I don't know if it was on this show, but someone said that they don't like hearing about Jesus. And so I asked a bunch of people about that, and a number of people confirmed that they had like not positive experiences when they talked about Jesus. So I was like, that's really weird.
That is weird.
DMT elves.
Yeah, and then you see Tucker Carlson.
Dave, do you know what they're talking about? What this is?
No, I'm not sure I do.
Okay, so
I think I can explain it.
Well, you know what DMT is, right? Like
DMT is a drug.
it's a hallucinogenic drug.
Yeah.
So it's not just it's not just a drug. They call it the spirit drug because so it's released in your brain naturally when you're dreaming, when you're born, and when you die. And the interesting thing about DMT, there's a bunch of CIA documents and studies they've done on it. And when people take DMT, there's literally recordings that they have shared hallucinations. Right?
Wild.
People,
so ayahuasca and in the rainforest, those things, they're all associated with it. But it's also, like you said, it's naturally produced when you dream. So there is something there, but people taking these, acetylated chemical versions of it, they have these really gnarly experiences. And sometimes they're like amazing geometrical patterns and everything like that. But sometimes they're these clockwork elves, they say. And so there's always atheists
don't like
they're
Jesus
doing drugs, and then they're like, wow, I'm getting all these spiritual experiences or something. But yeah.
And so the thing is, like, these are shared hallucinations. Like, if you took DMT and I took DMT, we're in the same room, we might see the same being, we might see the same creature. And there's a lot of interesting things. I 100% believe it's real. I believe that these are demons. I believe taking these type of drugs kind of lifts the veil from you, but almost forces it open. Where if you pass beyond the veil on your own,
an angelic spirit can actually affect physical reality only because it has the backing of God, right? So like I said in my example earlier, God says it's supposed to rain today, and all of a sudden everybody's dying in a flood, and they don't give a shit because God said it was supposed to fucking rain today. But if they decide to rebel, or they're just never had the backing to begin with, the only thing they can do is whisper in your fucking ear. They can't actually like push a book off a shelf. That's literally beyond their power. Once they decide to go independent, that's their limitation. So like unless they were following through, essentially unless they're following orders, they can't do a damn thing. Except give you some ideas, which is can be dangerous if you're prone to that. But if you're gonna sit there and listen to these spirits, if you literally listen to them give you a bad idea and call them a fucking retard to their face, then they're gonna reconsider a little bit.
So it's interesting that there's at least there's an old story, right? First Enoch, the very old story about fallen angels, and some part of the angel. There's two different stories within the book, but at least some part of what the angels did wrong was that they slept with human women. No, I'm not saying that's a historical account, but it's interesting that we have at least some.
It's an interesting philosophical idea to play with, even if you believe it happened or it didn't happen.
Yeah,
those are the days of giants. Yeah,
right. That's it. Right. That's the story. Genesis.
Yeah, my thoughts on Enoch is that it's a combined historical and spiritual account. So maybe that part necessarily didn't exist, but they're combining different stories.
Dude, we have 90 to 100 foot tall mammals on the earth right now. They're just whales lying on their stomachs. But if there was like vapor canopy, or if anything was different before Noah's time, I mean, the idea of giant things that could support themselves, we've already proven that exists, right?
You can't say they're 90 to 100 feet tall when they go on the beach and they literally crush themselves under their own weight.
Okay, but we've had Tyrannosauruses, and they're not 90 feet, but I don't know, what are they,
they're
40
like
or
20, 45 feet maybe.
They
didn't stand up straight. I saw this fucking crazy drawing. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. This is put up on the thing.
Still a giant, just a giant.
If you see this image, you're never gonna think of T-Rex the same way again.
There's some interesting thoughts about the vapor. Yeah, definitely like a vulture. But their vapor canopy theory is pretty pressing. This idea that there was maybe less of a difference between the air and the sea, and this idea that every day is like an age. So the 7 days might be the 7 ages that brought
Andreas,
us.
pull up the size comparison of the T-Rex I just sent over though.
Here we go.
Pretty funny.
So this is a large animal.
Make it more giant.
This is exactly what I believe. I'm so glad.
It's a giant fucking sparrow.
Yeah, it's a big bird. Big bird.
Like nothing that you shrink wrap any animal, it's gonna look fucking weird.
But these are like dinosaurs, dragons, everything. Like the more we find out,
I mean, all these cultures have stories about like fiery birds or fiery snakes and all that stuff. Like you find it all over. I mean, we were just talking about the Neshutan last time.
Or are you going to
Like,
bring
but
up the Leviathan or
totally
something like that?
ingrained
Yeah,
as
exactly.
mammals.
Leviathan.
It's ingrained into us as mammals to be fearful of snakes because that was our like main predator while we were evolving out of the rat phase, essentially.
Our main predator is the mosquito. That's what kills more humans
Yeah,
than
it's
any other
the
thing.
mosquito.
turns out.
So
Now
there's one reason why I did join, despite the fact that I've been coughing for most of the day until I took a bunch of hot coke earlier, was something I saw on Instagram that I wanted to ask an opinion about. But there's an idea going around about additional scriptures coming, about maybe the sealed portion of the plates or something. And I do think that that connects to us looking into like these Gnostic texts, these plain and precious things, all these things that are removed from the Bible, and actually understanding the Book of Mormon a little bit.
Yeah, but my
But,
concern is also think about these groups like I forget the name of it, the Sins of Our Mother on Netflix with the lady who was in the church and then she started doing her own Gnostic digging because the church
Well,
says
she
we're
was
not
like
gonna...
FLDS or something. I'm pretty sure.
I
I
think
looked
she
up.
started out normie LDS, but the thing is there wasn't enough for her there because she wanted more esoteric stuff. And if you can't get it from the church, you're going to go find it from somebody who peddles it on YouTube, you know? And I think it's really dangerous because you might be getting revealed revelation from God, but there's also, like we've been talking about, fallen angels, demons, and things that really like their only power is to whisper in your ear.
Yeah, I do definitely think that that's the reason why there's the Aaronic preparatory gospel, and then the Melchizedek gospel is more about like passing through the veil, second comforter type stuff, like actually entering into the presence of God.
I think a lot of people have a really weird relationship with spirits that cause them to have, like, if they start to hear something that they think is a spirit, whether or not it is or isn't a spirit, you don't have to listen to it. You can roll your eyes at it. You can be like, bro, not now. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a freaking spirit. It's literally just a voice.
The Atheist's Guide to Living with Being Possessed is kind of ironic.
Okay, that sounds a little bit out of pocket.
But David, you were about to say something. You've been very patient.
No, I don't know. I look, the idea that we might be about to get a bunch more scripture is of course exciting to me, but like this has been a thing that a feature of the restoration from the beginning is lots of people who are like, look at my book of Moroni, look at my book of Nemelka, look at my book of Mentina. Like there's actually like dozens of them.
Limited edition.
Well, it was Jeffrey R. Holland who said it.
I did see that quote of his on Twitter, and people were forwarding it to me and like, man, that's cool. So I hope that's true.
Yeah,
because the stuff that does exist, I try to always be open. So I'm like, because I don't want to be the guy, right? But like so far, it's always really, really bad.
Yeah, you know that's really funny. I actually was going to say this a couple minutes ago, but I was looking through videos like that on YouTube. There was one of this guy who claimed that the angel Moroni in England gave him the book of Gerenach or something. I saw you comment on that video.
Yes. I bought his thing, the book of Ryanek and Gerenach or something. And I'm always like hoping that it's good. Oh no, it's downstairs. And it was like really bad, semi-Arthurian, Celtic loving fan of Stonehenge Book of Mormon fanfic. And you're like, no, dude, this is not the way.
So if there's anybody who's going to be a good critique on sci-fi, fan fiction, and Mormonism, and be able to tell the difference between the three, probably Dave. So
is me.
What would you say if Jeffrey R. Holland, like, he gives us like the Book of Lehi or some other Book of Lehi, and it just completely trashes on King Josiah and the reforms and all this stuff? It's like, yeah, the King Josiah, he's hunting us down. He's destroying the altar of Heavenly Mother.
I would do a victory dance at that point. That would be, I would take a lap. That would be awesome.
I like where we're going with this idea of like infinite realms and like angels as well, because talking this idea of realms seems kind of like Buddhism, you know, this idea of the like asuras or like the different narakas, like there's different dimensionality to reality. Do you think that
that sounds like hell in Buddhism?
Mormon
heaven is literally Buddha's hell.
Part of
because you still exist.
Yes.
Part of the Buddhist hell is the Naraka, is the timed existence, and you might say that we're
observe all of reality for the rest of eternity. Holy shit!
No, Narakas
are fucking awful.
Narakas are temporary. There's no eternal Naraka for the samsara. So
no,
the
you
Buddhism,
become an omnipotent God, right? In Mormonism, if you do things right,
eventually, yeah. I thought you were talking
that
Buddhism.
means you know everything that's happening constantly, no matter what. You know every time somebody taking a shit.
Yeah, but it's in
That
your
sounds fucking
domain.
terrible.
That's
Well,
not
like-
what we more focus on usually, though, Sean. Like this is,
I
you know,
get
Well,
it,
I
but,
say
like,
j-
can you
just
really
because you
ignore
have
it?
the power to know if somebody's taking a shit doesn't mean you always know it. You know, I think
as
there's
a
sort of a
parent,
line.
Yeah.
there are moments
I
when
think-
you feel
Okay,
like,
I
you're
feel
like,
I
We need to
alright.
put a
Alright,
limit
God's
on
attention.
what God does. He's all powerful. He's capable of doing anything. However, he's going to limit his power into not doing things that don't make sense. He is a God of order, a
That's a
God of
good
light,
point.
But he
and he's not
knows
specifically going to get out of his way to do
You
things
have-
with his mind
You
because
have
he's all
access,
powerful.
Sean. You have access to a lot of data on the internet. You don't look at it all the time.
Yeah.
But-
You want
also-
to know how I view it? So the all-knowing aspect of God, I view it as being like a chess game where you know every single possible outcome, but there's still the aspect of agency. Like God knows all of the things we could do because he's just that intelligent. And then the all-powerful aspect, I see it as reality is divided into opposing forces, sort of like Second Nephi says, the forces which act and the forces which acted upon. So I would say based on like DNC 93, the force which acts is intelligence, and the force which is acted upon is matter, right? So God is all powerful because his intelligence has reached a level where he can command matter and decide the rules of it because of his willpower, because of his intelligence, right? So it is a demiurgic intelligence which commands matter, and that's why the resurrection is necessary. That's why incarnation into a physical body is necessary, because it's intelligence and matter becoming one.
Yeah, what do you think about that? The idea, because a lot of people want to look at God like either a man, like a single parent who writes books, or God as like the super singularity. It's like the thing that all creation is coming from. It's like, is it, how much of it is man in the image of God versus our image of God in the image of man? Like, which one's the way to look at it?
I feel like it's like if you were to like make a video game, right? This is an analogy, obviously, but I feel like it's a good way to look at it. If you were to make a video game, you'd have to at least impart some characteristics to the thing that you're controlling that makes sense to you. Otherwise, it would be just an incomprehensible mess of pixels on the screen. So there's like enough of God there that like when he looks out through your eye, it actually makes sense to him as a being. Rather than just being a comprehensible mess. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't really make sense to be a pebble that sat at the bottom of the ocean for 4 billion fucking years. Like, what kind of stories are you going to hear about while you're down there? Probably not a lot.
Yeah, that sort of goes back to the idea of the sons of God in the Book of Jubilees being sort of emanations of the one true God, where there's sort of, I guess, a portion of God. And then you get, again, in Doctrine and Covenants 93, where it says Jesus is called the Son of God. He's called God because he received the fullness of the Father, but he's called the Son of God because he received not the fullness at first. So I view that as Jesus having the fullness of that sort of universal consciousness within himself, right? And that as we all sort of elevate up that theosis and become one with God, become one with the universe, we all become partakers of that divine nature and that divine oneness while still being us, while still being our own persons.
Yeah, like Jesus came down to set the example that we're all supposed to follow. I think that's like the main theme that every single story about him tries to drill into everyone's head.
Hopefully. I feel like a lot of people just want to use his death, but not really like be like him. But Dave, you're gonna have to elbow your way in here. I mean, we got a lot of other people gonna try to talk for you.
No, I think actually I got to go to bed. I totally appreciate you guys letting me hop on and make my weird comment about Genesis 1:1. Sean, Leahona, Memes 8. Good to meet you guys.
You too.
And my apologies for elbowing in like I did, but
No, always. Well, anytime we can get back, we'll do
You
something
have
a
to
little
wake up
deeper.
at
It's very important.
4 or 5 a.m.
All right, Dave. Well, we love you very much. We'll see you next time.
Hey,
Thank you for
good
being
to see you
here.
guys.
Later.
Take care.
Yeah, Dave's cool. I love him. Wait, but we were trying to talk about the difference between God and everybody, because I was thinking this idea is interesting, that it's it really that we're so separate. Like if you're a God, the way you're doing it, watching people use the bathroom instead of I am the Holy Spirit flowing through all the world, which isn't like much better.
Yeah, like
now.
God doesn't know you're taking a shit because he's like sitting across the bathroom on your sink.
But you are
taking it because you know you're taking a shit.
But you are the energy like that is assembled
Right.
by
The fact
by
that
God.
you know you're doing
You're
it
part
means
of God.
he knows you're doing it.
Or
Yeah,
God is doing it, right? Because
Well,
you
that's
are
sort of
God.
that sort of goes back to the idea I was talking about intelligence and matter being co-eternal but distinct from each other, because that sort of solves three big philosophical issues there, both with atheism and theism, where one of them being that, let's say, God created everything from nothing. If you really break that down, we just basically exist in God's mind. We're not even real. We're just like a thought in God's mind.
Yeah, matter literally just means like the matter of discussion, like the thing that we're talking about. It is rooted in an intelligence, not vice versa. Like there needs to be consciousness for there to be matter.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if intelligence is just sort of the outcome of biological mechanisms working together from matter, and then it's not even a real thing, it's just a chemical reaction, you also get this sort of idea that nothing is real.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, like
where
everything
if
is just
intelligence, yeah. So if intelligence, yeah. So exactly. So if intelligence and matter, however, are distinct, that's the one way we can both truly be real, and it also sort of bridges that gap between the Buddhist sort of idea of God, of just being sort of the collective consciousness, and the Christian idea of God of being this higher being, where it's like there is this higher level being that is distinct from us, but we are also sort of one with it and can become one with it. And we're sort of in the same family as being intelligence. We're the same type of being. We have the potential to command matter through manifestation the same way God does.
I like the idea that matter purges itself in the process, that we're becoming celestial. And granted that everything is material isn't the same as saying everything is matter in the way we understand like matter. You know, this is interesting to me because people have talked about
matter is a concept.
Yeah, everything's a concept, and as you shed concepts, you have a more refined concept, and more refined concepts can emerge and be mimicked, memed, reproduced. All these things happen with a refined concept. You see, like the Bic pen or something, like the ballpoint pen, right?
Like I would imagine what would be called matter in heaven or in a place where beings were eternal and never had to, say, be threatened with eating each other or anything like that, would probably be very different and probably be far less dependent on things like time and space as it is in this universe. Like this universe almost seems to be designed to generate temporary beings that constantly, like you said before, refresh themselves.
Yeah, I like what you said, actually, that this is a Naraka, that this is a Buddhist hell, because it kind of is. In a lot of ways, you're right. Yeah. Think about it. You're leaving the Garden of Eden, and at some point, you're hoping to get out of this realm outside of the Garden of Eden. But while you're in this realm, also there's chaos, there's suffering, there's death, and your job is to process it. I don't know. That's
like you can also how I want to write a fucking book that's like called How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Samsara, if that's not already been fucking written already. Because not for nothing, like even though the universe is full of shit like that, you can still enjoy the fuck out of it. Because not for nothing, you've only got so much time here, and there's going to be like a certain amount of that going on regardless. So you can either learn to extract pleasure from the physical universe or not.
I actually love how much you curse, because it's kind of like Jay and Silent Bob's intro to Mormonism, which is a cool dynamic. It's kind of exciting.
Thank you.
No, this is something interesting. So there's a channel that I've been watching that covers a lot of really interesting esoteric and apocryphal themes in regards to Mormonism. It's called Latter-day Watch. Everyone should go subscribe to it. I love it. And he was talking in this video about sort of ideas of pre-existence in early Christianity. And there's a really fascinating sort of poem-like thing that he shared, where it starts out where the character in it is this prince, and he's the son of a king and a queen, and then he journeys off to a faraway land. And after he goes to this land of Egypt or wherever it was, he eventually forgets who he is, and he begins to take up the sort of pagan practices of the Egyptians and the people there. He forgets that he's a prince and he becomes dirty by them. And then a messenger comes to remind him. He's forgotten. He doesn't know who he is. He's living a completely different life. To remind him, no, you are this prince, and your brother, his brother comes, and his brother was already sitting on the throne with his father, right? And his brother comes and then takes him to the throne and says, no, you belong in this world. So that's obviously a metaphor for God and Jesus Christ, right? But it's really interesting because in a way, this world isn't us. The us we are isn't necessarily the real us. Like we have in sort of new age things, the idea of your higher self. That's your spirit, right? I think it's Galatians 5:17 talks about how the desires of the flesh and the desires of the spirit are contrary to one another. Because the real world is this higher dimensional world. This is a lesser world, a lower dimension that we have condescended.
What do you mean by
down
lower
into.
dimension?
I don't know, but you're saying is like if we were like put in here as
That's
like
all pretty dog in me right now.
except instead of just place here to enjoy it while we can, like you can enjoy the physical universe without being a horrible person and hurting anybody. You know what I mean?
Well, the point I'm making is that this world, the point I'm making is that this world, it is terrible. It is because we are divine beings. We are these higher level divine beings who have come down here, condescended into this lower level world so that we can overcome it.
But like, is that horrible and bad, or does that just mean that there's work to do?
I think it means that there's work to do.
Yeah.
If we didn't have work to do, if we didn't have something to worry about, then that would be something that worried us. Like, have you ever been idle for more than a fucking day at a time? It drives you crazy.
I agree. There needs to be opposition in all things.
Like, it's actually pretty good that you have, like, even if you're just moving boxes from one side of the room to the other, if it's something that's got to be done and somebody really cares that it's getting done and it's worth doing, then it feels good, especially if you earn something for it.
That's
it's better
That's sort of the point.
Sit around doing nothing.
Bootsop brought up that he used to do drugs and he doesn't anymore for like 10 years, and that's awesome. But also that he doesn't agree that sinners have more fun. I had way more fun before I started using drugs, or just as much fun. I can vouch for that because like Mormons do like mini golf and go-karting and all these other things that you never do if you spent your money on drugs and alcohol. Like you're not
doing drugs and drinking alcohol. I mean, if you're doing it like to an addiction level, like addiction means that you're doing it to distract yourself from something else, not to enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
First,
I mean, if I'm distracting
like,
myself from mini golf, I'd much rather mini golf than drink ever. There's nothing to do with it. It's just I'd much rather do it. You know, it's
as
way
long
more
as you're
fun
doing it in moderation, that's a little.
No, I don't need to moderate mini golf. I can mini golf all the time. Like I've seen Mormons at mini golf as families every week. You know,
you can probably become a mini golfaholic just like somebody could become a workaholic. If somebody's staying at work so they can like avoid their family or other problems or something like that, and that means they're literally compromising their life for work.
I'm a big fan of that, like, you know, LA diet thing where you're like, you can eat as much kale as you want. You can eat as much quinoa as you want. Just keep eating quinoa. Like, I don't care. Like, do it. Do what.
Hell yeah, because you don't digest kale.
Just like,
well, listen, I have work in the morning. So I'm gonna have to go.
Chad, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have work in the morning. I'm gonna have to go, but before I go, would you be able to pull up that YouTube page I was just talking about, the Latter Day Watch one? I want everyone to go subscribe to this channel. It is so good. Like I've been watching his apocryphal videos on one of the lives. There's some topics on there that I want to discuss. Latter Day Watch, yes, that guy. Everyone go subscribe to him. His videos are super interesting, super intriguing. He covers like all sorts of stuff. Like he talks about the Deuteronomist stuff on a few of his videos. He talks about Dead Sea Scrolls. He talks about Gnostic texts, going through all these interesting ideas. He talks about baptism for the dead and the harrowing of hell in early Christianity and how it wasn't outlawed until like 600 years after Christ. Super interesting.
Yeah. Now be careful. He low-key sounds like Chad. But when you did send me, you sent me a link, and I did follow him. Yeah, he seems like a really cool guy. Yeah, it's just that he sounds a lot like you, which is
absolutely. I think he needs more subscribers on YouTube because he's just covering all these topics that I love. And I actually emailed him to try and get him on the show. So if I can get him on, that would be great. If not, I'll just discuss the same stuff.
Oh, you should totally do that.
Needs to be talked about. But yeah, I'm gonna get ready for bed now. So go subscribe to that guy, everyone watching. I'm gonna go.
All right.
All right, good night.
All right.
But yeah, like I was saying before, any behavior can become addictive. You could literally mini golf too much if you're like missing meals or like not taking
You
care of
can get
yourself.
pizza
You're mini
at
golfing
the
too much, then that's
got
an
pizza.
addiction.
I don't know. I feel like as long as that's the thing. Like, imagine living in a world where everything you did was good. Like, it's possible. You can get rid of all the things that are bad. You can run around and jump. You know, you can mini golf. There's governors on the go-karts. Like, there's really no reason that the world can't be made into a Zion that's just like perfect. You know,
Place of one heart
you
and
can
one mind. I
engage in
think
your
that's
vices
possible.
so long as you're like, I think Seamus, he's a Christian, but he's not a Mormon. Was talking because he gambles sometimes.
Catholic.
And he says it's all right to do that so long as you're not gambling too much of your money, as long as you have your
because he has to pay
recreation
for
funds.
forgiveness. I know.
And then you have your funds for paying tithing, and you have your funds for paying your bills and taking care of your family and everything. Then it's fine. Like,
But that's the thing. Like, why do we have the word of wisdom? Is the word of wisdom really worth anything if it's just going to help you with your health a little bit? I mean, there's got to be a reason why God's asking. Like, okay, in Mormonism, they tell us not to drink coffee. Now we're finding out that coffee isn't really that good for you. Then it kind of burns your stomach from the inside out. But is it just for a little health concern that they've been saying that, or is there another reason?
Now,
same thing for gambling.
When did they tell you not to drink coffee? Because I'm not
Well,
sure if they had
technically, the
coffee.
word of
I guess-
wisdom says you're not supposed to have hot drinks. And yeah, they had Turkish coffee 1,000 years ago. What are you talking about? Of course, they had coffee. They just weren't drinking.
Wait. That means you can have iced coffee?
So they don't want you to, but realistically, it's the hot drinks is what the word of wisdom actually says. It doesn't say anything about caffeine, even though caffeine isn't really great for your brain. And I'm seeing like my dad right now, he's exhausted and fatigued all the time because he drank coffee all of his life. And so now he's old. He's got attitude.
You can be addicted to coffee.
Yeah, but caffeine in general isn't something that really you should take because caffeine will just block adenine receptors, which will then grow more adenine receptors, and you just become more tired all the time. So there's issues with taking caffeine. There's issues with augmenting
the trade-off.
Your body. This is something I think about all the time because transhumanism.
But no hot drinks at all?
I'm a big fan of transhumanism. Well, they drink hot cocoa. So there's. I don't know
That's what I was going to ask.
I don't know what I want you don't want me to tell you because
Is there like a temperature limit? Like, is it like 150 degrees?
What do you think about that? LDS memes.
Okay.
Do you drink hot cocoa?
Do I drink hot chocolate? I did when I was a little kid, but no. I think if you want to take it to a very personal level, I did it with milk. If you want to do it with a very personal level and be like, hey, is there like an exact number where if you pass it, then it's a sin, and if you don't, then it's all right. You're fine to drink it. I mean, I think it's much more about just things that we don't know, some variables that God hasn't revealed to us pertaining to, well, if it's a hot drink, then it's going to cause this in your body, and it's going to probably block this kind of receptor that's going to help you feel this thing or motivate you to do this thing. Or there's just so much that we don't know. And it's also kind of a test of faith where God asks us, don't drink coffee. And we kind of just got to be like, all right, well, we got to respect that. And we got to do our best to do that, even if we don't know exactly why.
I feel like if I drank caffeine, my life would be like totally different. You know, I'd be like exhausted half the time. What's up, Chad?
I saw you were talking about the word of wisdom, and I feel like most people got it.
Chad. Oh my gosh.
So just had to pop in to give my 2 cents on the word of wisdom. So I think one thing to take note of is the context of the word of wisdom. It specifies that it is because in the last days, essentially it's talking about addictive substances, and it specifies that in the last days, conspiring men will use these things against you. So it doesn't just list, hot drinks, whatever. It lists all these different things and herbs and alcohol. And it's basically a prediction that conspiring men will use addictive substances against us. And to avoid those things, to avoid your enemies poisoning you.
Or at least be prepared to withdraw from them. Like, not for nothing, like, you can, if you can, like, look withdrawal in the face and be like, yeah, I can be sick for a week, 2 weeks, I can have a headache for a couple of days, that's fine. and
Well, I
just
mean,
get through it without like
Yeah.
sitting there and pretending that that's the worst thing in
The
the
other thing
world
we-
because it's
the other thing
fucking
we're leaving
not.
out- the other thing we're leaving out is like there's two kinds of like you can be just a dude who's chilling, like you could be a person in the world, you know, whatever, or like you could try to be like a Jedi, and if you're a Jedi and you're going to the temple and you're doing all these things, your body has to be informed like yoga, and so if you're
But
not,
I had pretty serious leg surgery a while, almost. Wow, it's been a long time ago
Yeah,
at this
so-
point. I was a teenager, but I had I had like metal put in, and I was given like a lot of opiates after that, and I was taking them for a couple of weeks, and then one day I felt like they were making me sick in my stomach, and so I decided not to take them, and all of a sudden I got very sick. And I asked my parents what was going on. And they were like, "Oh, you're withdrawing from the opiates you were taking. You didn't realize that could happen." And I was like, "Oh no, what does that mean?" And I was like, "Oh wow, how long does that last?" It probably they told me it would last about a week. It was like 4 or 5 days. But I just decided that I was gonna go right through it and be like, "Wow," because I don't want this to be any worse than it already is. Let me just be like fucking done with these things. And yeah, the legs still hurt a lot after that, but the withdrawals, like, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Like I don't think it would have been in the context of Mormonism sinful
Yeah.
to have taken those if I was a Mormon. I'm not.
no, they're cool. They're cool with prescription
but-
medication too. Like the president, Nelson was a doctor, and he, the LDS Church is also invested in pharmaceutical companies. Which is something I'm against. Actually, I think they should be
Right. It would only become sinful, and I guess even in your religion, if you continued to take it after you didn't need it anymore, and it was just literally fucking your life up.
Yeah, that's true. But this
Yeah.
is also. Let me read a little bit of it.
Yeah, especially verse 4. Verse 4 is really good.
Section 89, the D&C, it's 1 through 9. The use of wines, strong drinks, tobacco, and hot drinks is prescribed. What does prescribed mean? Let's look at the word prescribed really quick. Prescribed
Written with some
Doesn't mean-
modifier.
banned, right? It's written in front of, right? It's so
Yeah.
So herbs, fruit, flesh, and grains are ordained for the use of man and of animals in 1017. So this is interesting too, because when you start talking about pharmaceuticals, or the word drug, dried herb, is actually
Prescribed could almost seem like foregone, though. It's like a euphemism for don't do that.
well. So the point of this also is there's certain herbs and fruits and flesh and grains that are for certain times and certain uses, right? And so of course, even tobacco, there's a use for it. They don't say you can't use tobacco. Actually, they say that you're supposed to.
This use from tomatoes.
You're not supposed to smoke tobacco, but you can use it on wounds. You can rub tobacco on wounds. That's completely fine. There's a
The
use.
nicotine comes from other plants too. Like the nicotine in this comes from I think tomatoes and eggplants.
Just like
Yeah,
this.
and another thing a bishop told me that I was talking to about this once is, so verse 3 and 4 is what the bishop pointed out to me. So verse 3 says, given the principle with promise adapted to the capacity of the weak and weakest of all saints. So what he said on that is that, alcohol, not everyone's going to drink it and have a problem, but maybe 1 or 10 people, they drink it and they're going to become an alcoholic.
What
And
if
they
you
can't
eat
just have a
soup?
rule. Yeah, they can't just have a rule for those people. So it's a rule adapted for the weakest among us. And then in verse 4, it says, behold, verily thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarned you by giving unto you this word of wisdom by revelation. So it's to protect us from the men who are conspiring in the last days, and to protect the weak and weakest among us from their plans.
And what
So
happens?
if you eat
right
soup and you finish all the solid parts, do you have to throw the rest away?
What are you saying? If you eat what?
If you eat soup and you eat like chicken soup and you eat all the chicken, all the noodles, and all whatever else is in there, and you just got the broth, do you have to throw that away?
No, you can have broth. You're talking about hot drinks again. I get it. Yeah, no, it's the hot drinks thing. Really,
Take it over it.
They say that hot drinks has to do. They think it translates to hot in the sense of distilling. So when you have like a hot spirit, like Scotch, whiskey, these things like that. There are some. The reorganized LDS are okay with beer. I'm pretty sure because like Lutheran confluence was in there, so they're like, okay, well, beer doesn't count as a hot spirit, right? Because it's not like whiskey.
Yeah, I don't drink liquor straight ever now. I don't
Right.
think I've done that in over almost 10
There's
years.
a lot of augments to that too, but I think beer has also changed a lot. Like if you're drinking a Californian artisanal IPA or whatever, it's got like a much higher percentage than these super low percentage beers that they probably like 3% beers that they had in, heat at
3-2 beer.
which is what you needed if you're going to have something that cleans the water. And Germans have these copper brewery systems that had really low alcohol content beers, effervescent wines.
Yeah, it just lets you store the water without it going rancid.
Right. So I think the difference is, again, like how can you tell what is good for you? I think looking at what he's saying here, it's adapted promise adapted the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints, right? I think it's also some people aren't able to do that. And so it's just easier to say, look, swear it all off so you can be solid. Because if you're solid, then you can do things, you have more energy, and you're able to be there on time. And it's a major thing, right?
Yeah,
like,
but then if you catch yourself getting shaky, you better fucking rein that shit in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it's without consequence. Like, you look at the libertine movement, you look at the 60s, you look at even right after the 1830s, 1840s to 1890s in America are filled with the opiate crisis, cocaine crisis. After the Civil War, you have former Civil War soldiers, which are creating these concoctions which lead to Coca-Cola, right? Morphine and cocaine and sugar mixed together. It's just
I don't know about that. I mean, it's like
you can't put cocaine back in Coca-Cola because it gets carbonation out.
Yeah, is that the cocaine usage in the early 1900s, while it was very large, it was really, something intellectuals did. But also, this was a time when only white people used it, so no one thought of the idea of just snorting it. They would have it
It's
in
like
pill form.
amphetamine usage in colleges now.
Cocaine was very popular in Brazil in the 19th century. There were definitely black people doing cocaine, and it was
here. No one was snorting
West,
until like the 50s or 60s.
Sure, but it wasn't just until, and that was from black people in Brazil's grandmothers in Brazil that figured that out. But it wasn't because they were breaking up the tablets that were being created in the 40s in Brazil. But it wasn't intellectuals only, because it was Civil War soldiers that found the most usage of it. They were prescribing it constantly to people who had lost a leg or had a leg cut off or anything like that.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
So, I mean, it was a major, like by the 1890s, we had a huge epidemic, an opiate crisis that rivals what we have now. And we don't think about like the bleeding of drug laws and drug stamp taxes that were merging in the early 20th century, which kind of culminated under Anslinger in the drug scheduling. Well, the pre-drug scheduling system was the Marijuana Stamp Tax Act was like 40 years before the Nixon scheduling system. But that was how they did it. They basically said, you can grow it, but we're going to tax it 100%. So there's no point.
I think that certain drugs, though, like that people kill themselves with should be banned or at least heavily restricted.
Yeah, fentanyl's crazy that it exists. And I think
my God. I'm not even talking. I wasn't talking about synthetics even. Like, I get that heroin is somewhat processed, but most of that molecule is assembled by the plant. You're like chopping off one hydrogen and adding some oxygen to it or some shit like that.
Well, bottom line, I think the idea of not taking drugs, like for instance, coffee, like I feel like I have a lot. People talk about how I have a lot of energy. I tend to have a decent amount of energy, and I think a lot of that is because I don't drink coffee and caffeine. I think little things like that, like are interesting to me because I'm so pro transhumanist. I'm the guy who's always saying like, dude, let's become gods with USB ports, not just with Mormonism. But at the same time, my natural being is probably better than almost anything that I can do to it right now. There's not a lot of things.
Yeah, when you add anything to the last human invention that also increased the fitness of the user while making things easier was the bicycle. Nothing ever since then. Everything after that weakens you, even if it makes your life easier, unless it's something that adds difficulty, like a fucking dumbbell. So yeah, like very few things. Like the reason the bicycle makes you more physically fit while making your life easier because it helps you get around, but it demands that you actually do the work. So like if anything saves you any amount of work, just like how coffee saves you from having to sleep. If anything's saving you from having to put in that agent effort,
it's gonna cost.
Then
it'll cost.
Yeah, it's gonna cost you willpower,
dude. Old people I know, like old Mormon 90-year-olds that have high energy, are different than 70-year-old caffeine addicts. People that have spent.
I guarantee you that they would go back to normal if they quit caffeine for a few weeks.
No, because the adenosine creates hormones in your brain, receptors that are designed to make you feel tired, right?
So
if you stop listening to them,
receptor, it's chemical. It's not like a physical structure that sits on the outside of a cell that can be burnt off totally. It's literally a chemical that sticks half of its head through the cell membrane, and then if the thing on the outside touches it, it dives into the nucleus and activates the genes that it needs to work with,
right,
so that
but
it can actually affect how the cell operates. But it's a chemical that is constantly turned over, whether or not it's actually activated
caffeine is
on the
synthetic
cell membrane.
The adenosine,
So
if caffeine is filling the adenosine molecular receptor, then you end up
it's going to
producing.
get upregulated.
Then you produce more adenosine receptors. It's chemical.
Receptor.
Yeah. So this is why people become more and more tired when they drink more and more caffeine.
If you stop
Now,
drinking caffeine, the amount of receptor is going
okay.
to decrease again.
Sorry,
and it'll normalize.
Yeah, but just the tangent that I wanted to go on is it's interesting that you're bringing up hormones, because the thing about hormones is that they're already, you know, programmed inside of your body, and it's what you do and what you choose to do that activates those hormones and those things that are already inside of you. Now, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but along with the word of wisdom comes the very famous subject of, you know, the law of chastity and everything that concerns pornography and masturbation. And the whole idea behind that is that it activates a lot of different hormones and things in your body. And of course, we're told not to do that for spiritual purposes. But do you think that it has
drug that your body makes?
Yeah.
Like
Would you say
drug and virus all operate the same way?
Wait.
Yeah.
They bind to a receptor and they get pulled into the cell. The thing about a virus is a drug that self-replicates.
This question though, hold on.
And so my question to you is, do you think that that it's because of these hormones? I just lost my train of thought. But the point was, what do you think the negative effect is of these hormones? Do you think that there's a physical toll as well as spiritual? Because you were talking about how every invention that was made after the bicycle weakens you, and especially your willpower. Coffee makes you tired, releases those kinds of hormones. When you masturbate, you release endorphins, which is literally a hormone that makes you tired.
If you're achieving orgasm without putting in the work to actually make it worthwhile, then yeah, you're cheapening it.
Yeah, you cheapen it, and there's a lot of chemicals that are released and a bunch of things that you can't exactly predict or what it's going to do to you, to your willpower, to your character, to your body. Yeah.
If you make things easy, if you constantly toss yourself, imagine you keep feeding a dog treats for no reason. Is that dog going to have any self-control?
No.
Yeah, if you feed the dog from the table constantly and you have a guest, the dog is going to offend your guest.
It's worse than that.
Imagine you are the dog and the person holding the leash in the spiritual equation there. Yeah.
Imagine you have a monkey, and every time the monkey does anything, you give it a treat. And eventually the monkey's trying to figure out what it did to get a treat. And so it starts subconsciously thinking it was this thing or that thing, which I think is also a major thing with this, with pornography and with violence in the media, with certain kinds of social media trained responses. They're designed to target the systems that give you positive reaction and then exploit them until eventually you learn that those are the ways to get them, not the natural way.
Yeah. One of the major things that's been playing a lot these past few months, I guess, it's always been around, but these past few months, there's been a lot of it. Fear mongering, we all know what it is. We all know to what extent it's being used. Do you think that also kind of triggers an emotion that people want to have? Those people that are always, addicted by watching like the media and like Fox News and CNN and CBC and all that stuff, because they want the drama, they want the interesting stories, they want to be in that mind that tells them survival, the world's about to end.
People engage in addictive behavior not because of the addictive behavior is actually entertaining. It's relevant. The addictive
I-
behavior has absolutely fucking nothing to do
So
with addiction.
my
Whether it's
take-
scrolling on your phone, whether it's heroin, whether it's anything,
My
they're
take was
distracting
simply, though,
themselves from something they don't want to think about. That's the value that they find in the addictive behavior.
That's
It's the distraction from something else.
But with like living in Hollywood and working in TV a little bit here and there, like look at Scientology and the idea of ingrained memories and fate. And you have kind of spirits that are using material, like they don't have access to material unless they're using your material form, and they don't have access to hormones unless they're using your hormones. So the idea of like a gray that can use your body to experience not just sugars but also emotions, and you go through a show.
Gray, it's just a concept that like possesses your mind.
Gray is kind of just a concept too, though, right? Like I don't.
Yeah, but like any
There's no, like,
concept that
grays in
possesses
the
your
book of
mind can
Daniel,
then
right?
all of a sudden
Yeah.
start using your body to affect reality.
But
Yeah,
really, even
anything
if
that
you're
whispers
thinking
in
of
your
it,
ear.
but even just from regular consciousness, you got someone who's watching a show that's about an argument that's happened. There's a drama that's then processed. They're emotionally invested. They process through that emotion, and then nothing really is resolved, right? But they feel like something was resolved because virtually they went through the experience that was on the television. So it's very useful for, it could be used to manipulate people. It could be used to help people like a ride go through realizations. But it also could just be used to, like sugar, exploit people's bodies for reactions, I think.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
if you really get down to it, like sugar comes from a living thing that is using the entire sugar industry as an apparatus to further itself from an evolutionary perspective. Like we're not even talking about a demon here. We're talking about a physical being like a plant that is offering up something to us as a species so that we continue to further it. The fields that we planted in are probably the most comfortable thing possible for that particular species of plant. It's probably free of any of the pebbles that might bother its roots and all of that. It's very rich with fertilizers, irrigated perfectly, purchased in property that's specifically constantly given as much sun as it needs. This is a very luxurious atmosphere for the sugarcane, and in exchange, humans get sugar from it. And because it's a vascular plant, it has no qualms with having large parts of its body chopped off because that's not really what it is as a being. That's just the part of it that it expels.
yeah. By the way, I'm gonna have to go to bed,
That's
unfortunately.
reality for a second.
But-
If we had like a meme, like a self-replicating idea that operated in the same way but didn't actually provide any material like the sugarcane does and doesn't have a material body, say it's something like intellectual property like Bugs Bunny. Warner Brothers probably pays a lot of employees very well based on the licensing fees they pull in for the fact that Bugs Bunny can make you feel something by saying, hey, you should fucking brush your teeth or something after like cartoons play on television. That's a non-material being that we created having a real measurable effect. You can measure the dollars that are moving based on it on the real world. So is it really insane to think that there can be some sort of a being that wasn't created by people that had similar power, just like an animal type thing, but again, non-material?
Oh, could be. Now, I'd love to talk more about this, of course. Fortunately, I have to go to bed. It was a great podcast. Definitely had fun time here with Xirtus. Nice to meet you two guys. I'll talk more about the endowment stuff later, possibly when Latterwave Chad will be able to join us again. And some other bonus stuff, of course.
I think I showed
our
Andreas
podcast could be
what they
really
may be
nice
talking
and
about, though.
Cool. All right. Well, LDS
Maybe.
memes, have a good night. Thank you for being here. Yeah, we'll get it straight next time. That was still pretty fun, though. I'm glad that.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Yeah. All right. Good night.
Peace. Sorry, Leahona Extreme. What were you saying, Aiden?
Oh no, those photos that I sent you, or like the concept of what was going to be on that documentary.
Did you send it to me in the Instagram?
Instagram.
Hold on a second. You mean the AI art you're working on? That stuff?
Yeah.
Here, let me pull it up.
No, but there is big contention that apparently a lot of the Mormon, especially the higher ups, may have.
You're talking about this?
Yep.
Okay. The Mormons are involved
may
with
have
this?
met, like, one of them met a Sasquatch.
Yeah, the
And
prophet's
then
brother.
Sasquatch just acted like he was Nephilim or like a demon, and it
was
just kind of like
Cain, yeah.
went with it. Like, all right.
If it has
Yeah.
a physical
Just saying,
body, it's not
alright.
a demon.
I've seen some weird stuff in Utah. I'll admit it. One time I was in the Utah Salt Lake City Mall, and like I don't know if you've ever been to Salt Lake City Mall, which I think they just changed or in the last few years have changed it. But like it was a weird building, and like 2 or 3 stories underground, partially sticking up like 6 stories up. It was like this huge, or like 4 up and then 3 down deep. It was like this weird Babel thing, and I just remember in the bottom floor, because the food kit court is like on the bottom basement floor, there's like doors that just seem like Disneyland to like tunnels every direction. So like, where are these going? Because like clearly they're going out in
Was there like
In
a lot of
maintenance
weird
tunnels?
security?
underground. Yeah, dude.
Wait,
Utah,
it was in a mall?
yeah, the Utah
If it's
Salt
in
Lake
a
City Mall.
mall, all right, get this, right? Let me tell you this. If you really need to get from one place to another in a mall real easy, just use the maintenance tunnels. They don't know who's a customer and who just works at a random store. The mall security doesn't keep track of that.
Dude, it was so like
The more you know.
yeah, it's like this weird underground and there's like I don't know, there's like lizard people in trench coats. There's crazy
No,
stuff
you can
going on.
totally go there. You could probably explore for like 2 or 3 hours and they still won't catch you because, like I said, the mall security has no fucking clue who works there and who doesn't. Especially if you have like an old shirt with a name tag on it or something, that like it doesn't even matter if the store is even there anymore. You'll spend all day in there. Nobody will say boo.
This world's
You know what you'll find? You'll find a bunch of fuse boxes and trash compactors and probably like a garage or two, the delivery tunnel and the trash tunnel. Yeah, those probably both smell the same.
The 10 realms are part of the Buddhist cosmology and consist of 4 higher realms and 6 lower realms derived from the Indian concept of the 6 realms of rebirth, which we can go into in a second. These realms can be described through the degrees of enlightenment that course through them. They have been translated in various ways. They're divided into 6 realms, followed by higher states of enlightened consciousness that lead to the Buddhahood. The 6 realms are hell, the hungry ghosts or pretas, the beasts, the titans or asuras, humans, and lastly heaven, or the realms of the gods. Above these lies only 4 holy states: Sravaka, the Pratyeka Buddha, the Bodhisattva, and finally completely enlightened Buddhahood. So this to me sounds pretty similar. I mean, it's also kind of like Scientology, but it's pretty similar. This idea that you're going to ascend through, get yourself OT8. So there's also these the idea of the where's it at? How high up do I have to go to do this? The Baba.
There's even
chakra?
quantum
Baba chakra.
unitarity or whatever. Like if you can observe every probability in or every probability distribution, it should add up to 1, which is something that we just assume is true, but nobody's able to prove it. Like the sum of all probabilities in a given equation could be different from 1, but nobody would be able to prove that.
So,
but yeah, it's all about like having that omniscient viewpoint.
You go from being like, so there's hell, which is like the Narayana kind of place, the Naraka. I don't know why I said Narayana. Sorry, Naraka. Narayana is the source. Naraka, which is this sort of temporary suffering or purgatory place, the lowest place, and then the pretas, which is the hungry ghosts. And this seems like where a lot of people that talk about hell, they're like, oh yeah, I saw the pretas, where people are like starving people are mauled by dogs. And then there's like the realm of the beasts, which I think has a lot more to do with like the animals. And so when people say that animals can't ascend, I don't agree. I'm pretty sure animals can. I think a lot of animals are pretty wise.
Humans are just another type of animal. So like there's probably like all sorts of different spirits passing through different types of beings constantly.
Yeah, I think there are special things. Obviously, there are special things about humanity. Humanity is a very unique superorganism.
Special to you, yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, that little bit of sentimentality is just meta.
No, I meant that objectively. Like there are a lot of things. I mean, there aren't a lot of things like humans. Humans are the most crab-like mammal, right? We're a superorganism that's built a hermit crab shell that is his civilization.
I feel like every animal's probably got that thing about them that's different from all the other animals.
Yeah, but ours isn't like super different. It's like assimilatory. Like we're not just one human. We're very obviously a superorganism. We are all of humanity. That thing has never died. And it's some animals are kind of separated, some animals are kind of tribal. We've evolved to have a hermit crab shell that is civilization. So we've become a crab. We're a single.
Yeah, we started wiring up the world.
We're a
like, with a
single.
nerve
Yeah, we're a single. We're a single species, like a single species that is one living being, like a siphonosauric jellyfish.
Right,
Right.
but that's what we do as an animal. Like that's our animal thing that we do. Like elephants do this. We build internets.
You know the
So, like-
Siphonosporiae, you've seen those? These crazy
Oh
jellyfish?
yeah, they're like 10 animals in like one cluster, and like
They
one's
can
the, like
be-
mouth and the other's the dick.
They can be thousands of them. Yeah, like it's crazy. You can't really. They evolved to the point that there's
They're
selective
colony
organs.
animals. Yeah,
Yeah. So
they're like
I mean,
tapeworms.
so we're not like unique necessarily, but we are special because we have a lot of these cool qualities to us. And the idea of the human species being immortal, has the potential to be immortal, if we don't kill it off, this thing has been going on and continues to go on, and it's becoming alert and aware. You know, that's the other thing.
I
That's interesting.
really doubt that any species is immortal. Like every
No, but
species will have time.
Humanity has the potential to be like an immortal jellyfish in the sense that if cells of it die and other cells of it continue to grow, then humanity continues on.
Yeah, Brian Johnson is a very interesting guy that talked a lot. That has been talking a lot about this.
How do you get from one get to Alpha Centauri? All right, like then we can talk. You know, like, but I've talked to so many people about this. Really, like even a generation ship, like you can't keep the energy inside long enough to get there. It just goes cold and you die.
I don't know. I mean, like, so I think one of the things also, if you read, ironically, because you bring up Alpha Centauri, like Kolob in here, when they talk about Kolob in the Book of Mormon, and they talk about the Egyptian belief of this sort of like celestial god realm in the stars. So this is like a space place, right? And people have associated it with the Galactic Center, Sagittarius A. I think Alpha Centauri was one of the Polaris.
It's 4 light years. It's not even. It's the closest star possible.
Yeah, I think Polaris is further, actually. So
no, Proxima Centauri is like the closest one out of all of them.
It's about
Alpha
4 light
Centauri is-
years. It's the it's Alpha C. It's the smallest of the 3-star system that's closest to us. That has very large. It's a red dwarf.
Well,
that
like I'm
has
saying,
2 or 3 planets that no one is lazy enough to check on it because there's a big blackout on it. They've noticed them. They just don't want to actually admit it.
yeah, they've probably seen something going back and forth or something. But like, even if there was something there, we're not going to be able to communicate with it. They're not going to be able to communicate.
I mean,
with it. We're
like,
not sending-
that's the
we're
thing,
not
it's
sending
like
representatives
just
back and
a
forth.
reminder though, like the whole point of Mormonism is basically that somebody from in space, right? I mean, this is a little, but stars far away, maybe like Alpha Centauri or further, like Polaris, are able and have been able to communicate and travel like messengers, right? Some people take it to ancient aliens places, but why not incorporate astrology and astronomy? Why not like look at it that way? There probably is. I mean, the more we look at how long it takes for something to evolve on this planet versus how old some of these stars are, how crazy is it that there is just communication that happened long ago, between civilizations that are Drake equation compliant?
Like I said, I feel like humanity could possibly be totally bound to this sun, and it would honestly make sense to me that almost every civilization is probably bound to their star entirely. Like to think that we might be immortal or set to colonize the universe, it would be nice. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's probably something to strive for. But
I think
in the grand
hominids already
scheme of
did
things,
it.
if we don't, I wouldn't be surprised. I'll be happy with a universe that's able to continue to produce consciousness for a couple of hundred.
I'm just saying, this is
trillions of years.
This is basically in the Book of Mormon. Like right here, this is the facsimile down here, right? This isn't the Pearl of Great Price, I guess, but still like the Book of Abraham, right? Like this is the idea. You got Kolob here, Olablish here, Enish go on dash, right? What do you think about this idea? This is kind of the Mormon cosmology of Kolob. And this is supposed to be kind of where Elohim comes from, right? Because we talk about God or whatever. This is Elohim.
Wait. How does he come from somewhere if he created the place?
I don't know if he necessarily comes from there, but he lives there. This is maybe his beach house. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's like how Santa comes from the North Pole, but like he was born somewhere else, but he comes from there every year.
That could be fair, but that is kind of the idea that there is a throne, like Kolob signifying the first creation, nearest to the celestial, or the residence of God, the residence of Elohim. This is where the Elohim live. I don't know. I'm sorry if I sound ancient aliens, but that's kind of what it is. First in government, the last pertaining to the measure of time. First in government and the last pertaining to the measurement of time. It just seems like beyond time and space, but a bit more Marvel Loki. Stand next to Kolob, called the Egyptian Olublish, which is the next grand governing creation near to the celestial, or the place where God resides. This is the next closest star. This is the next closest sun. This is the next closest solar system in this giant super solar system. What is up, right? It is called in Egyptian Anish Go on Dash. This is one of the governing planets. Also, is said to be said by the Egyptians to be the sun and to borrow its light from Kolob through the medium of Ka von Rash. Okay, so there's something interesting about that too, because of our whole thing with Sirius, with the Mayan calendar, the idea that there is a solar system that's spinning the opposite direction that we're having a shared sun with, right? That experiences time differently. I mean, like, there's a whole idea that there is
that
Nibiru
planet or whatever, a nemesis sun.
Nibiru has a nemesis sun. It's spinning the opposite direction. Our orbitals are going rather rapidly because they're smaller orbitals. This orbital takes 5,000, 6,000 years or 20,000, whatever it is. But because
Make
of that,
one observable prediction based on that theory that I can go outside and see, and then I'll give it credence.
Well, referring to Nibiru, it's also interesting right now is that we can't find Planet X, though we apparently should have good enough telescopes to actually see Planet X by now, or Nibiru, the Scott Brown, the guy that killed the whole Pluto thing.
Wait. Nibiru supposedly, I'm not saying it's real, but in the generally, what Nibiru is supposed to be is a planet with like a highly elliptical orbit, so that it can like disturb shit all over the solar system, right? That's what it's supposed to be.
Oh, so unbelievably,
they shut him down.
Yeah.
They shut him down
And
as
then-
soon as he was going to tell you. He didn't want you to know. It's a secret.
Like,
Hopefully, he'll be
as far
back.
as I understand, like if there is a Planet X,
Here you go. Here's why they call it Planet X, even, right? The real reason. Because it makes an X. And so
No,
the
it's
idea, I know it's okay.
the
but
X is a Roman 10.
I got it. But if there was a loop that took 5,000 years for Nibiru, and it took 5,000 of those cycles happen, so the years are happening rapidly for us. 1 year is happening very slowly for Nibiru. Things of
If there were a
expansion are
planet
relative.
like that, if there were a planet like that, it could be like fucking huge. If it were like all the way out at the edge of its orbit, like
Expansion.
the far end of its orbit, we couldn't miss it. Yeah. But
Sorry.
we would see its effects.
What were you about to say, Aiden? The Hone Extreme?
Oh, no, I was just saying, as 20,000 year revolution. I think there may be some different versions of gravity, or how we project gravity may not exactly work with that, because I generally view there may need to be another term or something weird that's going on with something that's going that fast, like just something that's general inertia.
Time has to do with orbitals. If time has to do with the orbital because the sun is shining and radiating it, then you have no sun shining on it for a period of thousands of years. It's essentially outside of time, and then bringing with it its own time because it has Kolob. And eventually,
time is a cube, man, and there's 4 simultaneous corner days happening.
Maybe. I think time just has to do with radiation. I really do. Because if you look at symmetry and how things are bombarded, particles are bombarded, it shakes them, it changes their symmetry. That's enough to describe time for me.
No, but like it's even if the planet, the actual idea of Planet 9 now, which is stupid because dwarf planets can be considered planets. if you really think about it, right? If you're a chemist, most things aren't like metals have a certain definition, right? Like nitrogen isn't a metal to a chemist, but if you're an astrophysicist, nitrogen is a metal because if you find it in a star, it's heavier than helium.
Yeah, that's
So like what isn't the metal changes depending on what discipline you're following. So
nitrogen.
The real reason that Pluto isn't a planet anymore is because they were really uncomfortable with the idea of having like I think 12 or 14 planets in the solar system, so they had to change the definition.
10,000.
What would you describe? What is? Wait, I'm not done. What is nitrogen other than a metal? I'm confused here. What are you gonna?
Nitrogen it's an organic non-metal in chemistry because it's a light element and doesn't form electron clouds.
But it can is the point. So potentially,
no, like if you have a lump of iron, like any electron in there can just like fly from one side of the lump to the other. It's like one giant molecule. Nitrogen doesn't do that.
Super dense nitrogen would do that, right? So
yes,
but we're talking about man.
So nitrogen. So in other words, gas is just its property, and nitrogen is a metal. Okay, we're good.
Plasma, but yeah,
cool. Glad we covered that.
Yeah, the problem of what is defined as a as a planet is that the big thing was it has to clear its directly surrounding orbit. Like its directly area has to be cleared of all objects. Pluto obviously doesn't have that, but then again, if something was the size of Earth at the size at around where Pluto is, it would also not be a planet because it couldn't clear out its whole orbit. There's other things there.
Oh, right. There's stuff that like keeps throwing stuff into it or something like that.
Yeah. So if you look at like
the other bodies that are like larger than Pluto further out.
Yeah, there's hundreds of them, but none of them really have cleared their orbit because their orbit also is like 500 years. It takes a lot of time to slingshot everything out of their orbit.
But there are orbit trajectories thousands of times further than Pluto. If there were a planet larger than Jupiter on one of those trajectories, it's plausible that we could miss it. But it would have to be on a circular trajectory that never crossed any of the orbits of the inner solar system because it would leave gigantic imprints every time it crossed that we would be able to see.
Oh, yeah, the eclipse. I mean, there's speculation.
Like there are no gaps in the asteroid belt that would be like characteristic of that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's plausible that like there's a gigantic field of ice out there, right? Like there's a gigantic field of ice outside of the orbit of Pluto, and if there is a large planet out there, that could be what's tossing comets into the inner solar system and probably into interstellar space as well.
Yeah, or it could just be a wormhole. We don't know.
I mean, probably like a gravitational anomaly that large.
If you look at the orbits, a lot of them, there definitely does seem to be something that is slingshotting them. But when we think of slingshot, we think of high velocity. The maneuvers, what it would be doing.
Tap something toward the sun.
It's very different type of it. It's the same physics, but it's very different than what we'd expect.
How about looking at this?
Yeah, like if you point something towards the sun and make it fall towards the sun, then it's going to be moving very quickly by the time it gets past Mars. If it started outside of Pluto, that's a long way to fall. And I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the gravitational acceleration towards something as large as the sun is probably a lot higher than 9.8 meters per second squared.
Yeah.
But also, another thing to consider, when something's that far out, it's not getting hit with that much light. There's the inverse square law to consider. So if there's a planet, again, if it's the size of Jupiter, 100 times further out than Pluto, it's not going to have no light reflecting back at us. So what the fuck? The only way you could see an object like that is if it happened to pass in front of a star. And then you still have to figure out what it is.
Look, I mean, like we have the ability to find it. It's just that it's so goddamn slow moving that apparently you cannot find it from all these photographs too.
When you say the ability to find it, it means you've got to shine a light on it, and that light's got to bounce back at the thing you're using to detect it. If it's 100 times further out than Pluto, even if it's the size of Jupiter, what are you going to use to detect an object like that?
Hubble, not the Hubble, but the James Webb.
And now, which direction do you point it in? Exactly.
We have the idea of exactly where it is, or at least
I
by
hope so.
probability standards. We have an idea on its orbit trajectory using a
I'm
humongous
not saying it's not
optimization
there.
thing.
I'm just saying that's why we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about this picture here? What do you guys see?
It looks like three guys, and one of them has a deer skull on his head. They're probably tripping balls.
Tripping ball. I don't know. It's like
Two of them wearing animal pelts, and one of them's wearing the skull.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What is it?
I don't know, man. He's got like two faces. This is the thing that talks about Kolob. It's so Joseph Smith like bought a dozen mummies one time, and they all.
That drawing continues underneath that bar. Zoom back in for a second. That rectangle that you were cropping it at is not the crop. Look below it. It continues there. That's the same image.
Oh, is this what he saw?
It's not the same image, but it's not. So again, I'm telling you, Joseph Smith bought like a dozen mummies, and like they burned a lot. Like people destroyed all of his stuff years later. Except that you can still go to. I think the Niagara Falls Museum has one of the mummies.
How did he buy
eat
mummies?
mummy powder as like medicine?
Yeah, people still do that. People buy like crypt juice and stuff for an auction. But anyway, Joseph Smith got with the mummies a bunch of papyrus and scrolls and things like that. And he's like, dude, these guys, I swear, are more important than you'd think because they have all this extra stuff, the burial rites. I think this is Joseph from the Bible because at some point Joseph went to Egypt, Technicolor Dreamcoat. He becomes very important, and so he in the Bible people have associated him in more recent times with Yuya, and Yuya is I'm pretty convinced that Yuya is Joseph. You can do some research for yourself and look it up, but that's this dude who during the drought ended up saving Egypt and really forcing people into debt because the drought meant that they had to buy grain from the reserves that you had, which led to the Hyksos rebellion and the eventual exodus of the Amarna, Akhenaten, Moses, Jewish people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, he's got all these books. He's translating them. He's saying that he understands Reformed Egyptian. And this is one of the major ones because this is the one that kind of reveals the attempted sacrifice of Abraham by the Babylonian. I think it's the Chaldeans or the Babylonians or the Egyptians. I think the Egyptians, right? The Egyptians are trying to sacrifice Abraham at some point. And then also the revealing of star-based Kolob, basically. The idea that there is Kolob, that there's also this Olanish, that there's, this realm that is, known about by the Egyptians, supposedly, and known about by these particular followers of this belief. And you can see some stuff in the picture, like, obviously this could be, some people have argued, they're like, oh, that Joseph Smith doesn't know what he's talking about. Not really what he's saying. But, here's this interesting thing, like hell or the underworld. You've got these, the different organs that are being stored right here. You know what I'm talking about? If you got your organs for your
jars.
Yeah. And then here's Hathor, probably. I don't know what it seems like with the calf.
Oh, come on.
What? Golden calf, Hathor. What do you got? What are you going to say? Oh, come on.
Nothing. My computer is just growing hazy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but one thing I see is this idea of this two-headed kind of Janus figure. You were saying it looks like he's wearing a deer skull, but I see it as it's two faces.
Oh, like I can see that. Yeah, looking in both directions.
Right, which you see again up here, kind of.
I see Patrick's starfish.
I could see that, yeah, because the Egyptians very rarely drew people from a head-on perspective.
Right, but to be able to see both directions at once, so they're seeing everything.
Does it ever seem a little odd that they never try different art styles? Or they're very meticulous about keeping it a very certain way.
Well, it was a form of writing as well, too, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is part of that. But also, how much of this stuff is actually written at the same time. And
if you get too creative with your A, I guess, well, actually, we have calligraphy. They got really fucking creative with our letters, and we somehow recognize them.
Yeah, I mean, if you look in Africa, the University of Timbuktu, or you check out some of the Songhai Empire stuff, essentially they did have schools where they just taught kids how to communicate with people that didn't know how to write yet. So you have phonetics and you have hieroglyphics, but you even have Gestalt where people are like, no one knows what this means. I got to put an arrow here. What's an arrow? Like, how am I going to lead people, even give them intuition? Ancient Chinese, you've got symbols that are like water is like 3 lines.
That actually comes into game design a lot as well. If you're creating something for like a video game, you're really trying to do as much as possible with as little text as possible because you want people to just understand what they're looking at. So you need to use very Gestalt patterns on screen to wordlessly communicate with your player. All design is actually a form of communication when you get down to it. You're trying to communicate an idea to your user or your player or your customer, consumer, the viewer of your artwork, whatever it is. If you're designing something, you're communicating something. So what were they trying to communicate with this? Andreas, you're muted.
Somebody's muted.
I was saying brilliant things and you all missed it. No, I'm just kidding. But no. Basically, I was just saying it's interesting. If you look at this picture, there probably are communicating some interesting things. It looks like this might have been a death rune that they give you with your death. Like that's what normie archaeologists say. They think that this is probably.
They found it in a mummy. Like if they dug it out of someone's grave, it probably had something to do with the funeral. Yeah.
Right. I mean, this symbol here, this boat, like the bird across the boat. Here
maybe it's like a chronicle of their life. Maybe it was a fisherman.
No, I think it's a boat to get you to the other side. Right.
Oh, like the Egyptian version of river Styx?
Yeah. That kind of thing. And there's 2, and then again, like Hathor in the underworld below, and then being judged.
This is like a 5,000-year-old funeral card. It might just have like when somebody dies, they give you like a Gaelic prayer and a picture of the sun shining on a road.
But like, this is where we get the idea of Kolob, and this is where we get the idea of Kolob and Olenish. Is the idea that these two? This actually represents more than that. This represents the entire throne room. This represents the 2 stars and the world.
But like you ever have like somebody die and you get like a card that says like, oh, may the wind always be at your back and the sun always on your path and blah blah blah, like a traditional Irish prayer, and it's like a little laminated card with a picture of their face. Like this is probably the ancient Egyptian equivalent of that. Maybe these particular gods they picked were like specific to like the business the guy had or something. That's like this is probably somewhat more personal to the people that made it than we're letting on, is what I'm saying.
Funeral fragments found from ancient Thebes dated between 300 and 100 BC, which along with 4 mummies were once owned by Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement.
Right, so but like the original people that created it were ancient Egyptian civilians, probably,
Maybe. I mean, or like the government.
Probably they had somebody die, so they had their local holy man produce like a religious artifact that gave them peace, and they put it in the grave with them.
For a long time, people thought it was completely destroyed in the Chicago fire, but they have some of it in the Smithsonian, apparently.
I think we may have looked more into, or they even may have looked more into these things. Like I said, these were probably just funeral cards from family that like were honoring their dead.
Well, it's a lot of work to honor the dead, and the amount of money it takes to have like a really nice coffin. If you've got gold painted coffin, chances are you're wealthy.
Oh yeah, especially if you were well off. Yeah, but
and to be wealthy in a time when there's droughts.
What kind of funeral cards do you think they gave out when Queen Elizabeth died? Like her family probably got funeral cards, and they're probably very nice.
Yeah, but Queen Elizabeth was the queen.
The last 1,000 years.
That's the question. Is like, is any of it? How much legitimacy do we have? Like, there's no evidence that this is necessarily.
I'm just saying, like, there might not be much more. There might not be much more deeper meaning from
archaeologists are trying to date this to
something that was just there to comfort the family that buried the person.
Archaeologists are trying to date this to 1,800 years after Moses, so that would be pretty far after Joseph. So I mean,
that means little. Like the fact that people do that, it means a lot. Actually, it's something that people should continue doing. Like be sentimental. Like it's part of what makes life worth living. But that's probably why this was there.
I find it interesting. I don't know. The idea of Kolob, man, like Kolob is wild, right? Like the idea of having like a star system associated with your religion. It seems like a kind of modern thing, but that it's
Seems
tied to
cool.
ancient time. Yeah, it's pretty based.
I mean, like the Egyptians were hugely into having stars. Like they aligned a lot of their archaeology with celestial events and all that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like I think they had like an obelisk that would like line up with eclipses every like few hundred years or something like that. So like the thing would point right up at it. Like that probably looked really fucking cool when they were sitting there. Like, imagine the thing's been there 500 fucking years, right? And you're in your whole family, you're just sitting there, and then all of a sudden it's pointed dead up at the eclipse. Like, holy fuck, they knew. That's got to strike That's got to strike something into your heart.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like if it's hidden, people can't wonder about it, and we're always like, oh, everything is supposed to be hidden, but like it should be something that you can just experience and like see. If it's like all celestial, then that means physical. And I think we have this issue with Galileo's error, right? There's that book, Galileo's Error, which said that it was okay to have religion and science divorce, essentially. And we don't have to.
Yeah, I don't see them as separate things, really. Like they
crazy that happened. We can't have that anymore.
But yeah, like, but also like having, I feel like if either mastered or I'm approaching mastery at a particular craft, it does lose its magic once you know how every single last bit of it works. You do lose a bit of the wonder, and it's something I'm struggling with right now. I'm really not sure how to deal with it because for literally more than half of my life, I've always been totally enthralled with at least like, oh, how does that one little bit work? And now I've pretty much run the full gamut, and it's somewhat it's almost discouraging because it's hard to find excitement into new projects in the field, you know?
I think like religion's kind of inevitable in a sense because we have to build priorities in values, and those are abstract. And so you can be conscious of it.
You can always approach the ideal, but you can never truly master that one, which is probably a good pursuit there.
I mean, we have hierarchies of attention, and your hierarchy of attention can change. But if you don't have a hierarchy of attention, if you try to avoid that, you try to avoid it, I think trying to get rid of religion is coming back. Like all the things in religion then come back in these horrifying subconscious ways, demanding themselves to be processed. So I think we do really need to look at science, look at spirituality, look at our priorities and hierarchies of attention more, and come up with a conscious plan for how to move forward, what our goals are as a species.
So you're down for like creating some sort of authoritarian, totalitarian control structure?
No, I think that's what emerges if you don't do it. Like that's what happens subconsciously because everybody needs this. So what you do instead is you consciously participate in the creation of the future. If you're aware of and you're participating in the creation of the goals, and you can prioritize hierarchies of attention, then you're probably going to be better off than someone who is just naturally, subconsciously fulfilling desires and passions, right? Because that could be something where you're like, oh, well, I don't even mean to do this, and then I just do this.
Well, desires and passions are two totally different things, but yeah, I can see what you mean. Like if you're living at the beck and call of her, just living like a dog, I think that's from Islam. But yeah,
they don't like dogs. It's too bad.
They don't, but they love cats. They're totally right about that too. Like cats. Like I don't think they're right about dogs. They're wrong about dogs, but they are right about cats. Yeah,
the dogs would always bark at Muhammad. That's always the funniest thing, where the dog, like the black dog, would not want to be near Muhammad.
I didn't know that about it, but I do know that.
It's
like
very funny how they
explicitly
say that the dogs, the street dogs there, did not want to be near him whatsoever.
I feel like
there's a big difference between a badly trained dog and a well-trained dog, though.
Nicholas, I'm glad that I'm on the front page. That's a start. That's what I need. I appreciate that. Dogs are from Anubis, right? And cats are, like, you've seen the cat from outer space, the Bastet kind of, in terms of Egyptian mythology, right? So Bastet. And I don't know, I feel like Bastet's kind of evil, but in general, cats I've always said are naked drug addicts that murder and they leave dead bodies at your door. And people seem to love cats because they're mind controlled. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? Like we all know
Cats
this.
aren't evil; they're just independent.
Okay, I mean, yeah, good and evil or points of view. I hear you again, but that kind of sounds like something a cat would say. So
No, it's like just like a dog. A dog needs you, and it like always will let you know that. Like having a dog is like having a kid. Having a cat is like having a friend. Like you need to like ask permission and shit. Like you can't just like like all right, this is the thing. Like cats have their own agenda and everything. You gotta like know how to like operate with a cat. Otherwise, you won't like them.
Have you ever seen that movie, The Cat Who Walked by Itself? It's like an old Russian Soviet animation based on a Kipling book, I think, or a short story. But there's all these different
adequate animation frames.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. You should just check it out. But like basically it talks about man and how man is given the gift to like hunt and control nature. And then man can choose which animals live inside and which animals live outside. But the animals that live inside have to do something for man to be domesticated. Otherwise, he just like doesn't let them live inside. So the cat says, well, I can come inside if I want to. And then the lady says, no, like, what are you going to offer to like live here? And the cat's like, I do what I want, really. And then the lady says, you can't just do that. And then he's like, all right, I'll tell you what, like, I bet you that you're going to thank me for doing nothing 3 times. And when that's done, you're going to invite me to stay forever. And you're going to leave milk for me and things like that. And so several times over, the cat does like little things that seem useful. I don't want to completely ruin it for you, but it's interesting that the cat is able to prove like it doesn't have to be a pet. It doesn't have to be a prey of the human, and that the human will let it exist and be autonomous and independent because it,
Cats are awesome.
All right. Well, anybody got any other thoughts?
To be able to get like a panther or something. But like every video I've ever seen of like people who have panthers, like I look at the panther and I'm like, the panther looks at everything in the room like it's nervous, and the only thing it moves for is either fear or food. That is not a pet. Sorry, no, like you can't have anything bigger. I think like a small lynx is like the largest cat you can have and actually
cheetahs
be sociable.
You can have cheetahs.
You saw my thing on the Thundercats musical, right?
The worst cat though. Like I would rather have a fucking hyena than a cheetah because at least the hyena is like almost dog-like,
Cheetahs are very dog-like.
What?
They act dog-like. I mean, like they like children. It's very weird. Like you can.
Yeah, like I would rather like I'm sorry, like a cheetah is like a crackhead cat. You know what I mean?
So
like
scared.
That's one cat that makes me go like, ew.
Protected, like.
But like I look at hyenas and I'm like, oh my god, kitty, and I'm like cheetahs. I'm just like, oh, like it's like a coyote, but like a cat. You know what I mean? I'm not like it weirds me out.
Dude, Thundercats is totally about the tribe of Judah. That came up randomly today at Base AF. We were talking about it, and I got to like mention that for a second. But like, you think about it for a minute, and you totally get it. It's all about the tribe of Judah, and I mean the red hair. It's like it's pretty hardcore. It's pretty hardcore. And then Momra. I don't know. This is not the good version of it, obviously. But
is this like an AI rendition of it?
You saw my AI rendition of it already?
No, I did not. I need to see it though.
Spirits of evil transform this decayed form to Mamra the ever-living.
In the shadows I reside where darkness holds its sway. My power knows no limit as I rule both night and day.
Mamra the ever-living with eyes that pierce the night, I command the ancient spirits with all my dark delight. Ancient spirits of evil, heed my fervent plea. Transform this decayed form, make me what I should be. Conquer the ever-living, my strength shall never wane. In the depths of darkness I shall forever reign.
Within my pyramid of gloom I scheme with wicked gleam.
My magic knows no boundary, it bends reality.
But deep within my being there lies a secret yearn.
To break free from this darkness and my true self discern.
Or Tigra.
A true self-discern.
Yeah, but right there.
Spirits of evil grant me power untold. Guide my path to conquest, let my story unfold. Among the ever-living, my legacy shall rise. In the hours of history, my name will bear.
It's all stable diffusion. Yeah, I love that one, man. That's
Do
like
you use which one do you use usually?
for what? For the music?
No, for just the clips. It was just
The AI pictures? I was just those are photos, and I just made them with Dolly. You know, I usually would do stable diffusion, but it was just like my friend was making a joke, and so I had a quick second to do it, and I just did it on the phone. But we should definitely make musicals, and I think it's pretty funny to like kind of conclude the Latter Day Wave chat with an Ancient Spirits of Evil musical rendition. But maybe that works in the weirdest way.
Damn straight.
All right, well, love you guys. Hey, Leahona, let's do something soon. Sean, let's get on again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, and everybody, see you next time.
See ya.
Have a good night, man.
Next up, call up, let's go, saints. Guided by faith where the universe paints. Celestial saints and a cosmic grace.